and welcome back to another weekly edit. This week I'm back in Darktable, the open source free photo editor similar to Lightroom, although with very much of a steeper learning curve. Now, if you're all familiar with Darktable, you'll know that it is immensely powerful, yet it has its quirks. But nonetheless, I always enjoy editing in Darktable. Now, this week, the image I'm going to edit is sort of a landscape slash outdoor image. It was captured back in 2011, I believe, en route to the high Drakensberg in South Africa. We were going ice climbing with I was going ice climbing with some friends. Although the image was taken on the foothills, so it was still quite warm lower down. Now, what else do I want to say about this image? Yeah, not a lot of editing needed for this image, in my opinion. So instead, what I'm going to do this week is edit the image in Darktable, but I'm also going to show you guys some interesting little modules that are quite unique to Darktable, and in that hopefully show you a bit more about the different things you can do in Darktable. I would encourage you to explore the program and play around on your own. It's really well worth learning, and it's free. That said, it does have frequent updates, so it's important to keep up with those. And if you're on a Mac, the installation process can sometimes be a little bit quirky as well, like the program. Now, besides the image being captured back in South Africa way back in 2011, it was also captured on a Fujifilm S3 Pro DSLR. So that's really an oldie but a goodie. It's, I believe it was 6 megapixels, and it was also quite a sizable digital DSLR camera. Nonetheless, it's the only one I had, so I slugged it all the way up the mountain to go ice climbing and to make the images. But in the end, it was all worth it. So anyway, that's it. Let's jump into the edit and get going, shall we? Okay, as you can see, Darktable's open here. I have the image in its own little folder, just so we can avoid any sort of confusion in that sense. Now this is sort of the grid or thumbnail, or what would be the, in Lightroom, I don't know, it's a grid view. And anyway, in Darktable it's called Light Table, as you would originally be viewing negatives on a light box. So we have the Light Table. Now, to head into the Develop module or the Darktable module where you would edit the image, all you need to do is double click or press the letter D. So you select the image, press D, it would open in the Darktable module. Now, by default, if you see on the left here, Darktable does applies default corrections to the image, which actually a lot of photo editors do. The difference is Darktable just actually shows you that it's done these. Excuse me. Now, if we go all the way down on the history stack here, or history panel, to original, you can see that's sort of what the image looked like before Darktable did its thing. And once it sort of interpreted aspects of the image and opened it as a RAW, this is what it looks like. So looking at it like this, maybe we can quickly talk about the vision for the edit, or, like I always mention, it's important to know where you want to take an image. Otherwise, I mean, you can be pulling sliders back and forth until the cows come home and not actually making any progress. So by visualizing or deciding ahead of time where you want to take the edit, where you want to end up with the image as a final edit, you're actually going to be spending less time editing and not wondering what to do with all these different tools, because you know which tools you need to do what. So for this image, like I mentioned, not a lot of editing I want to do. Basically, you want to enhance the colors, the contrast a little bit maybe. I do actually I like the haziness of the image. I might edit that or improve aspects of it more in the foreground. But as you move towards the background, the haziness, I think, adds to the atmospheric nature of the image. Maybe a slight crop and some color enhancement. Yeah, that's about that. And then I don't know if I mentioned it, so then that'll allow me actually maybe also to get to these sort of unique little modules that Darktable has that I've been playing around with, and I think that you guys might find interesting. So let's do it. So we know where the image was made, we know which camera was used, and we know what our vision is for the edit. Now, yeah, so like my last edit in Darktable, I'm just quickly going to run through these modules at the top here. So right on the left, we have sort of quick, I think it's quick panel, quick something, quick access panel. So this sort of adjustments that Darktable thinks you might want to have access to by default. I don't often use, well, I don't actually use that at all. Just to the right of that, which is what I generally sort of have a first look, is all the active modules. So these are all edits that are, or modules that are currently applied to the image. Then just to the right of that is where I normally start. That's your base module. Yeah, base module. So these are sort of very sort of initial adjustments, and I tend to work sort of bottom to top, left to right. Now, white balance, it's already been applied to the image. If I deactivate that quickly, you can see it had quite a serious color cast. Just going to reactivate that. Now, to my eye, Darktable has actually not done a bad job here, and it's actually often the case with white balance. Now, if we adjust that quickly, yeah, you have many different options here. I'm not going to go through all of them. So it says as shot reference. You can also do a set white balance to camera reference point, so basically as shot, and you can sample the image, etc., etc. Now I think I might just want to warm this up ever so slightly. So I'm just going to take that to the right. Now don't be alarmed. Just warm that up. I want to see the grass get a little bit nice and yellow. There we go. Now don't be alarmed by this warning. That's just, I think, a quirk within Darktable as far as my research has shown. Or maybe someone knows better. Let me know in the comments. So if we quickly go in this here, so we go before, after. So this nice bit of warmth added to most of the image there. Then highlight reconstruction has got mostly to do with this, if I quickly zoom in to 100%, which in Darktable you do by clicking on the image with the mouse wheel. You can see top right here, there's some funky stuff happening in the highlight, not only with some degradation, but also with the color cast. Now, highlight reconstruction has got mostly to do with the degradation. Currently it's set to in-paint opposed, which is not a bad option. There's some other options as well. If you look at reconstructing LCH, so have a look over here. Now, which is that? You can see that changes immediately to much smoother transition in terms of the highlights. And then if we increase the clipping threshold, you see some of the color comes back. So we zero that out. So now it's a little bit on the neutral on the white side. I'm just going to take that up slightly. It gets a bit of that color from the sun back. Just going to quickly switch it back to in-paint opposed. It's actually, if you look at this place, this little region here, it's looking very hot, very blown out with my currently selected options. So I'm just going to go back to in-paint opposed, which is actually look much better there. And if you drag up the clipping threshold, it's starting to get a little bit better, but not that degraded spot there disappears. So just like that, so that's gone. So I think we're going to leave it like that. The color cast we'll deal with shortly, I'll show you. Then haze removal we'll get to shortly as well. Rotate and perspective. The horizon line, yeah, it's a mountain range, so it's not much I want to rotate here. Orientation, exposure. So the image was a little bit underexposed originally, so Darktable by default sort of set the exposure to what it deems an acceptable level, and for me that looks good. I'm mostly looking at this foreground region here. Highlights, it's going to be blown out, I think, regardless. While I'm speaking about highlights, what you do have in Darktable around the bottom here is you have raw, this little pixel square here is sort of raw. See what it says? Raw overexposure. So if we toggle that on, that's not indicating anything, but just to the right of it is your normal highlight and shadow warning. So if we click that quickly, you'll see immediately we have a blown out highlight area there. So just something to be aware of. Tone equalizer, I'll explain also in a little bit. Crop. So as soon as I click on that, it activates the crop tool. You can you can show the guides. Don't show the guides. It's by default set to the image ratio. So then you just drag that. So I want to just drag that in from the right hand side and that up a little bit to get the hiker closer to the right hand third. Just like that, basically. Not to have too much, not to lose too much of the image. And then all you need to do is basically just close the module, then it crops. So there we go. Negadoctor, don't need to worry about that. That's more for negative scans. If I activate it, you can see it changes the image to what would be a film negative file. That's more for treating film scans. Color Balance RGB is where we are going to treat a little bit of the color aspects of the image, saturation, vibrance, etc. There are some options here, 4-ways, masks, etc. Not to worry about these too much for this edit. I'm going to stick to the master. Now, down the bottom here, perceptual brilliance grading is actually a bit more like exposure. So you can see if we pull up global brilliance, the image is going to get brighter. But it's in a very controlled way, actually. It's not overdoing it. I'm just going to zero that out. And I'm going to pull it up in the midtones a little bit, because I want this area here, the grass area where the hiker is walking, to get a little bit more bright, essentially. Then just above that, perceptual saturation, you can imagine what that is. I'll pull up the global one quickly and you'll see the image get a lot more saturated. Saturation is, I think a lot of you guys are aware, something we generally want to stay away from, but you can also adjust this, shadows, midtones, highlights. So it's very targeted, which is great. Now chroma, again, you can hover also these and hover over these, and Darktable will show you. So let's do a global chroma. It says increase colorfulness at the same luminance globally. So this is a little bit like vibrance. So this one I do actually want to pull up globally. So as I pull that up, you can see the color also gets, especially in the grass and a little bit in the highlights here on the hills in the distance, get more saturated, but in a less dramatically so than by using the saturation. So if we just deactivate that quickly, so have a look at the image, or actually I can go back in the history stack. So that's before, that's after. So very pleasing color enhancement that it adds. And again, you can do this for, you can pull up the highlights there. We put in the midtones, slightly different effect, and we can do the shadows as well. But we're going to stick to the global one. And then it has a funnily enough, it has a global vibrance slider, but that is not very useful. I'll pull that up so you can see what it does. So that is Color Balance RGB. It's much more powerful than that, but that's sort of just the gist of it. Then base curve is not something we're going to worry about here. Shadows and highlights is basically like shadows and highlights in Lightroom. It's got a default setting, so if I activate that, you can have a look what it does to the image. So it just basically brings down the highlights, opens up the shadows. In this case, for me, the highlights are not something I want to bring down at all anymore, because they are blown out, and as you can see there, it just sort of starts to get a little bit weird. Shadows, actually, in my opinion, actually fine. I forgot about this. So color reconstruction, if we activate that quickly, this just we activate that. So I'm looking at the highlights. The threshold, I'm going to pull up. That's more for recover clipped highlights by propagating surrounding colors. Now it's not having a major effect here, so I think one of the reasons is there's not much color there. So we're just going to leave that off, close that out. So currently, we've gone from, before I go any further, so we've gone from, how do I want to say this? So let me not get ahead of myself. So in Darktable, to do before, after, you take a snapshot, and then you can go back to about like step 7 or 8, or you can back to the original, and then you select the snapshot, and then Darktable will automatically give you a before after line. So we've gone from there to there, and then you just select the most recent adjustment in the history stack, and you zero out the snapshot, and then you back at where you were. There was one or two things here that I wanted to show. Yes, okay, so haze removal, so it's like dehaze in Lightroom. What you have, you can activate that, and as you can see, this sort of takes care of a bit of that haze within the image. Now, like I mentioned, I like the haze towards the background. So what I'm going to do here is actually apply a mask to the overall effect. Now, masking is one of the most powerful aspects within Darktable. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but you basically just you can click on this little pencil here. It'll open up the mask panel for this particular module, and then under you can see here drawn mask, no mask used, and then you have some options. You have circle, oval, or ellipse, draw mask or path, brush, or a graduated filter. So I'm going to use the graduated filter, and then I can place it anywhere within the image. I'm just going to click there. Now you can see that let me just hover over that. You see the arrow points down. So currently the effect is applied behind that, and obviously I want to apply it to the foreground. So I'm going to swap that around. Now, if we toggle this module off, you can see the effect is applied to the foreground. But if we activate over here on the right hand side, activate the mask, you can see it's was actually remembering my previous settings, because I had to just quickly practice this as not to waste too much time. So the way to adjust this is you just hover over the graduated filter so that it's highlighted or becomes a bit more bold, like you see here. And then you hold in Shift and you scroll with the mouse wheel, and then you can see the feathering getting more or less. So I want to make it a little bit less, a bit like that, and then I want to just sort of drag it there. And to rotate, you can just grab this little circle at the back and just rotate it. And then with opacity on the right hand side here, you can also adjust the overall opacity. I'm going to leave it at 100. Happy with that, and click out of it. So now the dehaze is only applied to the foreground, which is pretty much what I want. That was the one aspect that I said we'll get back to. Exposure tone equalizer. So this is an interesting module. I sometimes use it. You can almost use it a little bit like dodging and burning. If I display the exposure mask, which you can see on the bottom here, you can see it changes into grayscale of the image, and it's got exposure values here from -8 to 0. And as you hover over the image, you can see it tells you where the exposure values. Now, let me just quickly click out of that, and then you can, so all the areas within the image that are -1, if you drag that to the left, it's going to darken. So you can see it's mostly the shadows here, and then if you want to lighten some aspects, let's see -2 there, so -4 will be quite dark, and then 0 will be more the highlight areas. And if we deactivate that, so you can see we sort of just enhance a little bit of sort of local contrast there. I'm not going to make use of that for this image, so zero that out, deactivate it. Crop we've done, Negadoctor, yeah, so I think the base, that's pretty much good. If we go into tone, no, actually I'm lying. I wanted to go back to the tone, no, not the tone equalizer. I'm getting confused, so moving on. Local contrast, something I think a lot of us are familiar with. Tone curve, you can add you can activate that and then add maybe a slight S curve. You can also take a little eyedropper and select an area of the image there, and it will give you a line on the tone curve, which you can then sort of adjust as you like. So I'm just going to zero that out. Now, Filmic RGB is where we're going to correct this color cast and the highlights. This is the aspect that's actually reconstructing or bringing those highlights back into sort of into line, for the lack of a better term. So I'm going to deactivate that, and you can see immediately the top part of the image is completely blown out. I'm just going to quickly look at the highlights there, you'll see. Now let me activate Filmic RGB, and you can see immediately a lot of that comes back. But we can do it a little bit better. So I'm just going to take that back quickly. Now within Filmic RGB you have some different options as well. You have reconstruct, look, display options. Now under scene, white relative exposure is something you can pull up or down, sort of find a good balance. Have a look at this area here, and then you also have highlight clipping, enable highlight reconstruction. If we enable that, again I'm looking at this very much blown out area here, and we play around with the threshold, you can see that sort of changing as well. Now if we take that to the right, it starts to get a little bit weird. Now, the area is blown out, so I don't want to bring everything back. It's just a natural part of the image of the scene. So actually what I want to do is take this to the left, and you can see the area getting a lot more sort of a natural blown out highlight nature to it. And then lastly, under look, there's a little option called highlight saturation mix. Now, just by under reconstruction, taking the threshold to the left, we've already actually addressed most of it. But under look, with highlight saturation mix, if we drag that to the right, you'll see that getting, again, a little bit of a weird color. Zero that out, and we drag that to the left, it'll just desaturate those particular highlights to where it sort of looks more like it should. Yeah, and that there's a lot of other options here, but I think that's pretty much the most important part in terms of this image for Filmic RGB. Then you have RGB levels, RGB curves, etc., etc. But currently, I'm pretty happy with where the image is. Then moving into color. Yes, color. Yeah, we have aspects like color calibration, which is a little bit like the white balance. Let's just drag that quickly. So here, if you drag that to the right, the image gets a little bit warmer. If you drag it to the left, it gets a little bit cooler. Zero that out. So I'm currently actually pretty happy with where that is. Generally, Darktable takes an overall, if I just click on the eyedropper there, you can see it samples the whole image. You can target that very specifically to a small area, and you can see the white balance changing. Because I'm selecting only the grass here, which is quite warm, it'll cool down the whole image. But if we select most of the image, it has a very nice sort of neutral white balance effect, essentially. I'm just going to zero that out to get back to where we were. And RGB primaries, so different color channels, and color lookup table, LUTs, color correction, which is one of those little unique little modules. So this is almost like applying, almost like split toning. Now, when you activate this, nothing is going to happen. And then when you drag this to the right, you'll see the little white dot represents the highlights and the black dot represents the shadows. So currently the shadows are neutral. So if we drag the highlights here into the warmth or the orange, you'll see them getting a lot warmer. Or if you drag them towards blue, you'll see them getting a lot cooler. So we'll drag them a little bit towards the orange. And then if we take the black dot, drag the lines, yeah, so yeah, there we go. It actually tells you that. If we drag that towards blue, the shadow will start to get a little bit cool. So drag the line for split toning. There we go. So now, like I mentioned also, there are many ways to do the same thing within Darktable. So this is one way of applying split toning. So if we just quickly look before, after. So warmer highlights, cooler shadows. Great, let's leave it there. Color contrast, yeah, I think we'll leave that alone. I spoke about Balvia briefly, I think. So activate that. You can also see the colors just getting a little bit of a saturation boost. So this sort of applies the effect originally of Fujifilm Balvia color slide film. For me, this is always a little bit strong, even though I like the effect. So I click on the mask and I take the opacity down somewhere like 40%. And that's about that. Before, after. Very subtle effect, but quite pleasing. Color zones. Again, this is something that I quite enjoy in Darktable. Now you've got along the top here, you've got lightness, chroma, and hue. Lightness is something we're going to work with. So you see immediately there's a line through the middle here and two dots, one in the blues, one in the yellows. And this represents the colors within the image as far as I can tell. If you just hover over that, shift scroll, no. So color zones, selectively shift hues, chroma, and lightness of pixels, which basically means the pixels with the colors in the image. So if we take the yellows here, so this is going to be the grass, and we drag that up, you can see that the grass in the foreground getting nice and lighter. So just adding a little bit of an initial nice sort of color contrast effect within the image, essentially. And then for the blues will be more in the shadows, so we drag that down. So then look at it before, after. Yeah, that's quite impressive actually. Very nice effect there. Great, so that's color zones within Darktable. Monochromes are black and white. Output color profile we're not going to worry about. And then going into corrections. These are a lot of different things. Most of them we're not going to worry about. Hot pixels, raw denoise. So if you have, if you have any noise you want to get rid of in the image, but even at 200%, besides slight pixelation, I don't think you can agree, noise is not something that we're concerned of in this image, funnily enough. Yeah, I mean base ISO, a lot of daylight to be expected to some degree. Surface blur, no rotate pixels, scale pixels. Again, we can hover over these. Darktable will give you a quick summary. So scale pixels, useful for certain sensor types and anamorphic de-squeeze. Nope. Lens correction, this is a very old, you can see the camera there, but this was a very old lens, so it's not really available or being able to be picked up, so don't worry about that. Liquify, so you can do some liquifying, not going to do that. Retouch is for more like frequency separation, portrait retouching, astrophoto denoise. And again, here we have the contrast equalizer, which is something that I use for sharpening within Darktable. So if we zoom into 100% here quickly, I'll zoom in maybe in the video as well. Then when you hover over this little model, you can see it has a little circle. Now if you scroll with the mouse wheel up and down, you can make it bigger and smaller. For sharpening, I always make it as small as possible. And then from the left here you have coarse details, all the way to the right fine. Now we're going to stick to the fine details because we're going to do that level of sharpening. And then basically top and bottom you can see contrasty or smooth. Now contrasty is going to be the sharpening part. So I just way on the right hand side with a circle as small as possible, big, small. Just click on that and I drag up to more or less about 2/3 of the way. And I'll leave that, and immediately let's maybe zoom into 100%, and then I'll deactivate it, and we can see. There we go. You can see it went from there to there. It's a very pleasing sharpening effect without enhancing noise or sort of any sort of weird funky effects within the image. And this is at 200% with a 6 megapixel DSLR from like almost 15 years ago. So that's sort of a quick sharpening. There's a sharpening module, again, different ways of doing the same thing within Darktable. And lastly, we have effects. So here, there's graduated density, there's diffuse and sharpen. It's a little bit of a more involved module, as you can see. Sensorize, there's blurs, shapes. It's a low pass filter, there's a high pass filter. You activate that, you can see it has the same look to where you use a high pass filter in Photoshop. Deactivate that quickly. Color mapping to replace colors, bloom, colorize, low light vision. You can add some grain. I think I'm going to leave the grain for this image, although I'm actually someone who likes to add grain to a lot of my images. Soften. It's like, this is actually also a nice little model. So if you like adding an Orton effect, I think which a lot of landscape photographers do, especially sort of in woodlands, let's just activate that quickly. And you can see, so by default it's quite strong. Then you can either play around with the mix or with the size, etc. Or you can go immediately to the masking options and just take the opacity way down, and then just start to take it up to where you would like that effect. Again, I mean, it's actually adding a nice sort of enhancement to the haze in the background. So maybe we can leave it there and then apply the same mask we used for the dehaze or haze removal. Now the nice thing about Darktable is all you need to do is actually select the mask, because it's always there. So if we have a look at here on the right hand side, click on here and then just select gradient 1. And it immediately applies the same mask in the same position. So I don't actually have to do anything besides maybe just move it a little bit up and rotate it slightly. And then, no, sorry, we have to leave that active, sorry. And then we can, now this is quickly. So to get back to the mask, you just have to click on this little arrow to edit it. Obviously I want to do it in reverse, the effect, so I'm just going to rotate that around. There we go, correcting myself. Now the effect is only applied to the background. There we go, perfect. And then we have a split toning module as well, but we did split toning a little bit earlier. There's vignetting, framing, etc. Now the nice thing about Darktable is it's not a frame, but it has what's called ISO something something, ISO 12646 color assessment conditions, which is a fancy way of saying add a white border for you to better judge the colors within the image. So let's click on that, and now we can sort of compare to the white around the image. Our eyes just have a better chance of sort of judging the colors and the contrast within the image. While we're in here, we can also actually take a snapshot and go back to the original, click on the snapshot, and then we'll get a before after line. There we go. That was before and that was after. Before, after. Yeah, so we've come quite a long way. And I think in terms of the color edit, we will leave it there. The one thing I maybe want to do quickly before let's just quickly get rid of the frame. We'll go quickly back to base, white balance, and we'll take the tint a little bit, zero that out actually. Take that. What's it doing there? Oh, it's reacting a bit slow. Take that a little bit to the left. Okay, so if we right click in Darktable, you can adjust it by smaller values. Just like that. There we go. Just get that green cast. Yeah, okay. So that's the color edit in Darktable. I know I said there's not much to do to this image, but I think yeah, I got quite long again because I wanted to show you guys some of those unique little modules. Yeah, if you want to stick around for the black and white edit, please do. Otherwise, thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you in the next one. But let's quickly do the black and white edit. So let's head back into, or actually no, we're not going to head back into the Lighttable module. We do virtual copies or duplicates in Darktable within the Darktable module. So bottom left here, we can click on either original, which is going to duplicate it without any edits, or duplicate. It's going to duplicate it with edits, I believe. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so like I mentioned, like we did I think previously, Darktable does have, is in the color, yeah, it has a monochrome module. So we're going to convert this to black and white by activating that. And yeah, immediately it's actually not looking bad, a little bit flat maybe. Now, just like within, I think it was the contrast equalizer, it has a circle, and by scrolling the mouse wheel you can make it bigger and smaller. So by making it bigger, it's sampling all color channels, red, green, blue. Making it smaller, it's sampling smaller aspects of that. And with black and white images, if you go towards green, depending on the scene, ooh, that's getting a bit funky. A bit of an experimentation as well. So let's make it a little bit bigger. I think let's keep that maybe within sort of total sampling area. Then move a little bit more towards green, red, blue. It really depends on the scene, how it's going to react. I'm looking more on in the foreground region here. So more towards green, look at that grass, it's getting a little bit lighter. So in terms of the default black and white conversion, I think that's pretty much good. Now I am going to add basically just some contrast with the tone curve, and that we're going to go back to tone, tone curve. Now we have this very light S curve here. Now all I'm going to do here is basically just enhance the contrast. So towards the shadow area here, I'm going to pull that down. You'll see the shadows getting nice and darker, and then towards the highlights here, I'm going to pull that up. Now I'm not too worried about, it's actually not blowing out, we can still see the detail top right there. I'm not too worried about that blowing out actually. This dot here, I'm going to take more towards the mid-tones, and I'm also going to pull that up. Now that's looking nice and contrasty. So let's just have a quick look here. That was the initial black and white conversion, and that's after the tone curve. Now, in terms of this image, I don't think there's much else I actually want to do. I mean, but considering the tonal values, the differences between the highlights and the shadows here, the contrast for me is actually quite good. There's still some details here, even in the shadows. And overall, I think that's not looking bad. I might add some grain, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Some grain, so I'm going to activate that. Now, by default, you can see here in the shadows especially, it adds quite a lot of grain. I'm just going to deactivate that. So that's where we were. That's with the grain. That's a little bit harsh for me. You can see in terms of coarseness, it's at 1600 ISO, 25% strength, mid-tone bias, whatever that may mean. Amount of mid-tones bias from the photographic paper, response, modeling. Yeah, I mean, Darktable's, yeah, it's powerful, but there's a lot of information, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. Didn't we have some, we used to have some presets. Maybe I made some presets. Anyway, so you can take the coarseness, or I'm going to take the coarseness down to about ISO 400, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800, about there. Again, if you right click, you can adjust it in smaller values. And strength, take that up maybe a tad, now that we've got finer grain. Just pull mid-tone bias down, see what that does. No idea. So we just have a look quickly. Without grain, with grain. Now, in my opinion, that adds just a bit that black and white. Please render it. There we go. Effect, and actually also smooth out the highlights a little bit, funnily enough, by I think hiding some of the flaws within the grain. Deactivate, activate. Yeah, you can actually see that here along the ridge. But yeah, anyway, I think in terms of the black and white edit, again, it's going to be a quick one. It's already gone on quite long. Holy moly. Yeah, I think let's leave it there. So, again, that's Darktable. I'm still learning it. I hope you learned something in this video. Yeah, mostly about how important it is to play around with Darktable, get to know it. It has got bulk editing capabilities, and once you're more familiar with it, it is quite fluid or efficient. But yeah, I think most of the power at the moment, for me at least, comes from just editing individual images with those unique little modules, and the raw conversion that Darktable does is, for me, quite phenomenal actually, especially with older digital files. So yeah, that is pretty much that. Thanks for sticking with me. And yeah, I think there's nothing left to say but see you in the next edit. Have a good one.